Every day, Elijah Brooks ran toward the pain, flashing lights, shattered windshields, crying children, fading pulses. He never hesitated. People called him a hero, the kind of man who made the worst day of your life survivable. He knew how to stop the bleeding, how to breathe for someone until they could do it on their own, how to bring people back from the edge. But no one ever asked what it cost him. Not when he pulled a toddler from a burning car, not when he watched a mother's heartbeat fade beneath his hands, not when the screams followed him home and stayed. He smiled in the break room, joked with the guys, worked extra shifts, and told himself he was fine, strong, solid, useful. Until one day, he found himself parked alone in the back of an ambulance, staring at his own trembling hands. What happens when the one who saves everyone else can't save himself? And what if the person who finally sees him isn't another medic, but a patient he thought he was rescuing before the exhaustion, before the nightmares, before the silence became louder than the sirens? There was a moment Elijah never forgot. His first save. He was 22, fresh out of EMT school, still learning how to lace up his boot without overthinking it. The call came in just after midnight, choking, infant. He barely had time to think. They raced through red lights, every second slicing into possibility. When they arrived, the mother was screaming, "The baby!" "Blue!" His partner shouted instructions, but Elijah had already dropped to his knees. Instinct and adrenaline took over. He turned the baby over, delivered the back blows. Then, a cough, a gasp, a wail. Relief washed through the room like floodlight. The mother collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved her." Elijah didn't cry then, didn't even smile. But later, in the dark, he looked at his hands and whispered, "I was meant for this." Elijah Brooks never planned to become a paramedic, but saving people, that was always in his blood. He was the oldest of four, raised in a two-bedroom apartment by a mother who worked nights and prayed mornings. He learned early how to make his siblings breakfast, how to calm a fever, how to break up a fight without raising his voice. By the time he was 15, his teachers called him responsible. His neighbors called him a good one. His friends, they called him the fixer. But no one ever asked what it was like to carry that kind of weight, what it meant to be the one who always had to be okay. He joined the EMS Academy right after high school, didn't go to college, didn't need to. All he wanted was to be useful, and he was, first on scene, last to leave. The guy who could keep a newborn breathing in a gas station parking lot while the mother screamed beside him. They called him calm under pressure, unshakable. But Elijah knew better. He had just learned how to bury the shaken deep. After 15 years in the field, Elijah had seen things most people only glimpse in nightmares. He stopped counting the number of people he lost, or the ones he couldn't save. He wore their names in silence, remembered their birthdays when no one else did. And still, he showed up, early, prepared, smiling, because that's what heroes do. They show up. But at home, the cracks were growing. The dishes stayed in the sink. The phone went unanswered. Sleep didn't come easily. And when it did, it didn't stay long. He kept a bag packed by the door at all times. Not because he was ready to go, but because part of him never came home in the first place. No one knew how tired he really was, not even Elijah. For years, his sister Tasha called him every Sunday. Didn't matter if he worked a night shift, didn't matter if he sounded tired. She always said the same thing before hanging up. Love you, Eli. Don't disappear, okay? But slowly he did, not all at once, not in ways you'd notice in passing, but in pieces. The calls grew shorter, then less frequent. Sometimes he wouldn't answer at all. And Tasha, she stopped trying to fix it, not out of anger, out of heartbreak. When you're ready, she texted once, I'll still be here, but you have to want to come back. He never replied, not because he didn't love her, but because he didn't want her to see what he'd become. Tired, number ashamed. He told himself he'd call her when he had something good to say, but the good never came, and silence became a habit. The call came in like any other. Code 2, possible overdose. Male, late 20s, alone, unresponsive. Elijah rode in silence. The sirens blurred into habit. His partner drove. He stared straight ahead. But inside, something felt different. He wasn't afraid of what they'd find. He was afraid of how little he felt about it. They arrived. Cracked door, flickering hallway light, the kind of place grief clings to the walls. Elijah knelt beside the man, pale, sweaty, barely breathing. He moved on instinct. Check vitals. Administer Narcan. Hold the line between life and death. One more time. The man blinked awake, groggy, slurring, but alive, and then he looked up at Elijah, straight into his eyes. Why'd you bother? The man asked. I didn't want to come back. Elijah didn't flinch, didn't respond, but something inside him cracked, because for a split second, he understood. Not just the words, but the feeling. That deep, unspoken exhaustion. The kind that doesn't scream. It whispers. They wheeled the man out. Elijah stayed behind to finish the paperwork. He sat in the back of the rig, closed the doors, and stared at his hands. Steady, capable, hands that had saved strangers, held grieving mothers, restarted hearts. But suddenly, they felt foreign, like they belonged to someone who didn't exist anymore. For the first time in his career, Elijah asked himself a question he couldn't shake. What if I'm the one who needs saving? The shift ended. Elijah signed out, tossed his gloves, didn't say much on the drive back to base. His partner, Jess, noticed. She always did. They'd worked together for 3 years. She knew when he was running low, but Elijah was a master of camouflage. A joke here, a shrug there, always fine, always focused. But that night, as they sat in the break room, she didn't joke, didn't fill the silence. She just said, "You've been bleeding for a while, you just don't leave a trail." Elijah looked up, eyes tired, but something in him stirred. Jess slid a card across the table, worn edges, folded in half, a name scrawled on the back. I talked to her when my brother passed, Jess said. She won't fix everything, but she'll remind you you're worth fixing. Elijah didn't take the card right away, just stared at it. What did it even mean to ask for help when you're trained to run toward everyone else's emergencies, but never your own? That night, he didn't sleep. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't just replay the screams. He replayed the voice that said, "You've been bleeding." The next morning, he called the number, hung up twice before saying a word. Finally, a voice answered, warm, calm, human. "You're not the first paramedic to call me," she said, "and you won't be the last, but you're the only one who can decide to stay." 2 nights after he called the therapist, Elijah sat alone in the station locker room. Everyone else had gone home. The hum of the vending machine was the only sound. In his hand, a letter, typed, printed, folded. His resignation. He had written it that morning, no dramatic explanation, just a few lines. 15 years is a long time. I think it's time for someone else to take the call. He stared at the envelope for over an hour, picked it up, set it down, again and again. Then he pulled out his phone, opened his sister's last text, the one that said, "When you're ready, I'll still be here." And for the first time in months, he believed her. He didn't throw the letter away, but he didn't turn it in either. He placed it gently in the back of his locker, behind an old photo of his EMT class graduation. Not because he was certain he'd stay, but because, for the first time, he wanted to try. He booked a session, didn't tell anyone, just showed up, quiet, closed, but there. And when the therapist asked him why he came, he didn't have a polished answer, just this: "I save people, but lately I don't know what's left of me after they're gone." It wasn't a fix, but it was a beginning, a break in the armor, a moment where Elijah stopped being the rescuer and let someone throw him a rope. Healing isn't linear. It doesn't come in waves. It comes in inches. Elijah kept showing up, to therapy, to work, to life. But inside, the war hadn't ended. It had just changed its mask. He started noticing the things he used to block out. The mother who whispered thank you and then fell apart. The kid who asked, "Is my brother going to be okay?" The silence after the sirens, things he could no longer numb. Then came the shift that almost broke him. Another overdose, same address, same man, only this time he didn't make it. Elijah worked the scene like a machine. Compression, injection, shock. But it was too late. Back in the rig, he sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, hands frozen on the steering wheel, eyes burning. "Why do I even do this?" he whispered. "What's the point if I can't keep them here?" He thought about quitting, not just the job, everything. For a long time, he just sat there. No radio, no partner, no noise, just stillness and the weight of too many losses. It was a quiet night, rain on the windshield, a call that didn't end badly but shook the new guy anyway. They were back at the station. Elijah found him in the back of the rig, hands on his knees, staring at the floor like it might split open. The kid looked up, eyes wide, voice shaking. "I thought I could handle this. I studied, I trained, but I can't stop seeing her face." Elijah sat beside him, didn't say much, just let the silence stretch, let the weight breathe. Then he said, "You're not broken. You're awake. And that hurts sometimes." The rookie looked at him, confused, relieved, seen. Elijah offered a quiet laugh. "I wish someone had told me that back when I started. But now I'm telling you." The kid nodded. "Didn't say thank you. Didn't have to. Sometimes the healing is in the being heard, not the fixing." And for Elijah, that moment wasn't just about saving someone. It was about not disappearing again. When he finally returned to the station, there was a folded slip of paper taped to his locker. No name, just 5 handwritten words. "You brought my son back." Elijah unfolded the note further. Inside was a drawing, crayoned in bright colors, stick figures, a big yellow ambulance, a man with brown skin and tired eyes, holding a little boy's hand. It was from a kid he'd saved 3 weeks ago, a quiet 6-year-old boy who had choked during dinner. Elijah had been first on scene. He barely remembered the call, but the boy remembered him. "Thank you for saving my daddy," the drawing said. Elijah's throat tightened, his hands trembled, but for the first time in months, he let himself cry, not out of despair, But release, grief finally met with grace. Because the truth hit him, he would never save everyone, but the ones he did still carried his touch, still remembered his name, and for once, that was enough. Elijah still wears the uniform, still answers the calls, still holds the line between life and loss. But now, when he pulls on his jacket, he does it with both hands. One for the world he serves, and one for the world that almost lost him. He's not healed, not fixed, not done, but he's aware of the weight he carries and the truth that saved him. Even heroes need someone to show up, to knock on the armor, to ask not, "What can you do for me?" but, "How are you really?" He doesn't answer that question with jokes anymore. Sometimes he just says, "I'm working on it." And that's okay, because vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the doorway to breathing again, to letting in light. He tells new recruits now, don't wait until your hands shake. Don't wait until the silence feels safer than sleep. You matter, before the call, after the call, always. Months later, Elijah stood at a podium, not in uniform, not with sirens wailing outside, just Elijah. In a community center gym, under flickering lights and rows of folding chairs. The room was filled with first responders, some young, some seasoned, all tired, all listening. He cleared his throat, held the microphone loosely in one hand. "I used to think saving lives meant you had to forget your own," he began. "That showing up for other people meant you had to disappear a little each time." He looked down at his notes, then folded them. Didn't need them anymore. But I was wrong, and I almost didn't get to say that out loud. He told his story, not every detail, but the truth, the weight, the silence, the moment he almost let go, and the small, steady voices that pulled him back. At the end, someone asked, "How do you know you're really okay now?" Elijah paused, smiled, not big, but real. "I don't, but I'm not pretending anymore, and for now, that's enough." The room was quiet. Then one person clapped, then another, until the sound rose like something sacred. And in that sound, Elijah realized this was saving too, the kind that didn't come with sirens, but with stories. Maybe you've never ridden in an ambulance. Maybe you've never held a stranger's life in your hands. But maybe you've been the one who shows up, who fixes things, who listens, who holds everyone else together, but forgets to hold yourself. So this is for you. You're allowed to need help. You're allowed to be tired. And you deserve to be seen. Not just when you're strong, but especially when you're not. If you've ever been the strong one, the helper, the listener, the rescuer, then maybe Elijah's story felt familiar. Maybe you've carried pain in silence. Maybe you've wondered if anyone would notice, if you were the one fallen. Let this be your reminder. You're not alone. You don't have to earn rest. And needing help doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. If this story spoke to something in you, or made you think of someone who always shows up, share it. Let them know they're seen. Let them know it's okay to be the one who needs saving sometimes too. Subscribe to Able in Every Way for more stories like Elijah's. Stories that remind us, behind every strong face, there's a story. And behind every story, there's a soul worth reaching.